Okay, so continuing the recording, I zoomed in a bit on the Chinese theatre. The light's not hugely great, so it's a bit fuzzy. The quality's not so great. Anyway, um, where were we? Yes, so JCP points, which affect the limited war. They also get gained. Yes, that's right. They get gained by taking certain cities, which give replacement points. Taking factories, taking resources, and also by eliminating units, but only units with a strength, either defense or attack strength of 3 or higher. So the Chinese have gained 1 so far from the Japanese, but the Japanese have not gained 1 so far from the Chinese. And as I think maybe it's quite common with games like this, really the most effective way for armies to move is not the direct assault on units, but to try and encircle, surround, reduce them out of supply, and then when either they get sort of eliminated or then they're sort of more easily attacked and taken out. This is essentially what the Japanese are trying to do. It seemed a kind of obvious strategy that their occupied area ends about here. It's not delineated by this colour. This is the terrain colour. This it just happens to be forming a lot of their area. So there's a dotted red line here that ends here. So the Chinese are holding sort of the mountains and the hills surrounding, most of them surrounding that. There's obviously a kind of like a salient, as it were, sticking out. So if the Japanese just move down south, they can cut the forces off from there, because the Chinese do not have a navy to supply them. Anyway, if they did, the Japanese navy would be happy to blow it out of the water. So that's what the Japanese are trying to do, but it's not that easy. Because this is an Asian Pacific theatre of operations, each hex here is worth half. Essentially it represents twice as big an area as on the European theatre of operations. So although units have a movement value of 4, that's for the whole game. In Europe they could move 4 hexes in the clear. Here they could only move 2 hexes in the clear. And you can imagine as soon as you get into the mountains or rough terrain, rough terrain, mountains, etc., their movements rapidly decreased, especially when any weather effects come in, like mud or monsoon, etc. So often units are only going to move 1 hex. So it's a slow movement down. And then the other point of fact is the way the combat works. So it doesn't work on a sort of combat odds, but it's on a combat differential, and then you take hits. And then you can sort of take as many rounds of combat as you like before either one retreats out of the hex. So often the attacker might go in and then retreat out of the hex, because I'll explain it to you better when I do a combat, but essentially, although an attacker might advance into a hex with, say, 3 units, and the defender might only have 1, only one of those units can attack at once. So there's like a lead unit, and that is the attacker. So you do not sort of add all the strength points of the units in, but the first attacker might be worn down, destroying the defender, and then the attacker might lose a whole unit, but he still has 2 other sort of fresh units in the hex. You'll see how it works, but I mean, during the rounds you can swap your lead units around and so forth, but I think it's meant that I've been a bit tentative. I don't want to lose units in order to give points to the Japanese to enable them to sort of make more counterattacks and so forth. So the Japanese are moving slowly, but the Chinese, all these Chinese here will be out of supply this turn, at the beginning of their portion of this turn. And then if they're still out of supply at the end of their portion of this turn, you roll a die, and there's various modifiers which are often subtractions, or I think all are subtractions, and then that number of hits are taken off those out of supply units, and so they might be eliminated at the end of the turn. I think that's all I can say now about this. Let me just zoom in a bit. I'll have to do a pause and give you a better look at the map. Okay, I'm experimenting with an extended gantry on my floor standing tripod here, so there could be a lot of bounce on it from the slightest movement. So we'll have to see how it goes. I might have to scrap the video, I don't know. So you can see a little bit more, but not a whole lot more. One thing I'd like to point out is there's like river transport here. Hang on a minute. Yes, you can't really see much from there, but yeah, I was just pointing out these are river boats, so you can get supply down rivers marked on the map. And really that just gives you a bit more of an idea of the situation, the kind of stacking and so forth that you might get in the game. So it's all happening here in China at the moment. I'm going to move closer. Okay, that's better. You get a better idea of the map and so forth. One point I would note is that I haven't quite distinguished exactly what different areas on the map are. This I think is a swamp area, and this I think is forest. But I won't show you but disturbing this gantry thing here. But okay, I'll give you a quick look. You see, over on the terrain effects chart, the hexes are teeny tiny versions of the hexes, and the colours are quite subtle between some of them, so it's very difficult to actually distinguish if it's rough the same as this. So I'm going to have to check some of the other games in the series to check exactly what's what in terms of terrain intention by the graphics. That's why I don't really like these kind of like fuzzy flocked computer generated graphics. The mountains are much clearer. You can't see it so well here, but no, those are here mountains. You can see mountains, and then this is obviously jungle. But other bits are not so clear. Anyway, that's kind of like a minor point, and it's easily sorted out. It just takes a little bit of effort, and I can appreciate the sort of difficulties of a designer and a producer in producing this kind of thing. It must take a lot of work. So anyway, I'm just showing you a little bit here of what's going on. This is a temperate zone divider. So this is the subtropic, and this is a north monsoon zone. So you could get separate weather in those. There's a resource here, Chinese unit. There's Chinese units here in the mountains, and they have a factory there. This is sort of the main target, the Japanese here. And the Japanese, they also have a... this is actually theirs, because the dotted line is delineating lines of their control. This is already theirs. What is that? That's Canton. It's Japanese. And you can see it's a city hex. There's just the grey hexes are full city hexes. You also get kind of partial city hexes. This indicates the anti-aircraft value of the hex, because you often want to attack city hexes to destroy resources, factories, whatnot. This is obviously a harbour marker. Because there's no number by it, it means it's an unlimited harbour. It can have an unlimited number of naval units in it. And this is a coastal defence value for the harbour, so that's a coastal defence value of 3. So this was already Japanese territory, so the aim is to simply link up. The Japanese have taken a hex here, link up hexes here, but there's a river, and this is mountains, so the attacking units coming in take lots of minus modifiers, so it's going to be difficult to take. But they need it to completely cut off all these from supply. Although, yes, they do need it to completely cut all of them off. In fact, they're going to have to move some folks up here. But the Chinese have got the first turn this turn. That's interesting because you roll for initiative, but the Japanese have some bonuses at the start of the scenario, and other bonuses can be bought with supplies and so forth to add modifiers to the initiative die. They sort of once spent, they're spent. So the Japanese haven't spent many of theirs yet, and they've been conserving them. Maybe they should have saved it for a critical turn like this, but you have to weigh up which turn's more critical than the other. Here's a Japanese headquarters there. Let's go out a bit. Okay, so you get a little bit of a bigger picture of what's going on. Sorry about the wobbliness. Okay, so yes, this is Formosa. It's Japanese. They've got a resource. There's Hong Kong. That's British, completely isolated from China and so forth. There's a French unit down there in Indochina. Yes, I don't know what more to say about my turn yet, but going on to sort of taking the turn and then telling you a bit about the phases as we go along. Just worth mentioning is if I can just maybe scan up here, I have a chart which shows the Pearl Harbor game. That's this game of the series, the replacement point activation chart. So apart from getting replacement points from processing resources and factories, you also have cities that can be activated and then provide replacement points. So Japan has these that can be activated. They're not activated until a nation declares war. So Japan hasn't declared a war on China yet, and it's a limited war. And China also has these, and these will give land unit, I think, just land unit, I'm not sure. Well, no, they will help to give replacement points, because you have to produce units by spending bits of supply material, depending on what they are, but ground units mostly just replacement points. But apart from that, what I wanted to mention, so it's worth Japan taking those cities from China so that they won't be able to activate them. China can activate some, I think, with a certain options at costs, etc. But up here, I've noted there is given on a different, like a nice chart in the game. I wanted to keep a tally. I'm having difficulty keeping that in picture because of the bounciness. Keeping a tally of DPs, which diplomatic points. So Japan starts the game with 25, China with 10, and I had to guesstimate what the allies, that's essentially the British Empire and the French, the USSR and the USA have in terms of just this theatre, because it wasn't clarified in the rules, although I believe the designer believes it is in the rules well, in between the rules and charts. I haven't been able to figure it out if it is there. I'm going to send him a request to clarify it, but we don't know when that. He is active on Consim World replying to stuff, but we shall see. But I wanted to get going anyway. So this is just to indicate. So essentially, at the start of the game, and I think my estimate's quite good. The Japanese start with more diplomatic points than their combined potential, their foes and potential foes, and they spend them to influence nearby countries. Now, as far as I can tell, I think this is correct. I think it's basically sort of what rules say or give without explicitly stating it, is that only Afghanistan, Mongolia, Burma, Tibet and Siam are countries that will change allegiance. They all start off as neutral. So they can be swayed up to 16 points, and you roll a d6 for this towards the Allied, or 16 points towards the Axis. And you can see that they started neutral, and Japan has started influencing Burma and Mongolia. So, and we've had some counter influence. The Chinese spent some points because it was looking like Burma was pro-Axis, and the next turn, if essentially what you do is you spend diplomatic points according to the country's level. So Burma will cost 4 diplomatic points of the Chinese to roll a d6 to bring it towards their side, and then the Allies can then counter that if they wish immediately, just get 1 counter, so 1 go of each turn to bring it back. Why? Because